Afternoon, everyone. My name is Lena Esposito. I'm from Connecticut Family Support Network and the Bilingual Family Coordinator for the South Central region. Tonight we have Michelle Anderson. She is the director of, hold on, of Early Childhood EdAdvance. And then we had the pleasure to have her here with us tonight, Michelle, to present this beautiful topic about what is Mckinney Vento and special education. Then thank you so much to come. I just want to give some house rules. First of all, as you guys know, this is recorded right now. Then if you guys want to keep your video off, it's okay. If you guys want to change your name, it's okay. If you guys have any kind of questions, please, you can feel free to put it on the chat. And then at the end of the presentation, we will answer any kind of questions. And then, thank you, Michelle. And then the floor is yours.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. As Lena mentioned, I'm Director of Early Childhood at EdAdvance. I also have an MSW, so Masters of Social Work. So the Mckinney Vento work kind of intersects with social work, but a lot of my early childhood department work, I'm very familiar with special education. We run a very large birth to 3 program. And I do a lot of partnering with school districts, preschool special education. So work a little bit with the younger kids, and then Mckinney Vento law kind of puts me out there with the older school kids. So I think it's a great topic for anyone to be educated on, and I'm hoping it'll help some of you on the call as well. So I guess I'll just tell you, Lena, when you can switch the slide and off we go. So you can switch it.
There you go. We're in
Yeah,
business now.
yes. So tonight I'm going to give you a little bit of background on family homelessness in Connecticut. We're going to learn about the Mckinney Vento Act and how it supports students in Connecticut. And then we'll explore a little how it intersects with special education law. I'm not an expert they're both huge laws, so I'm not an expert on either law, but I work more in the Mckinney Vento law. So I help school systems in our RESC region. EdAdvance is a regional education service center. There's other service centers around the state. You might be familiar with CREC or CES or Learn. Learn is on the shoreline. There's also EastCon. So we are one of those agencies. There's ACES in the Hampton area. So in the New Haven area is ACES as well. So we are one of those agencies. So we are always helping school systems. So the Mckinney Vento Act is something that I help our school systems with in our RESC region. So we can switch the slide. Yeah. Great. So, I won't take time to go off the slide and click onto this, but if you are interested in looking at children and youth homelessness across the United States, and you can click on different states, you can click on Connecticut, you will see our homeless numbers, but I did pull some of that data. So every year, Mckinney Vento liaisons, which I am for the school system in Torrington, I help Torrington out. I'm not their named liaison, but I'm a support to Torrington schools. We have to hand in data every year. So EdAdvance has to hand in data as well on our schools and who's homeless. So in our state, we had close to 4,000 students pre-K to grade 12 that were identified homeless for the school year. And that's in 2021-2022 school year because, as we know, data runs behind, and the state, that's the most current data that's collated. So that's a lot of kids in our state that are deemed homeless per the schools. And we will go over later in this presentation what qualifies you for homelessness. So then, there's a whole group of individuals like Head Start and Birth to 3 and Early Head Start and other early childhood programs that are very interested also in learning how many kids under 3 are homeless in our state. So this data isn't from a count in the schools or a computer system. It is our best estimate that, as you can see, there's just over 1,000 that are identified homeless in our state between that time frame. And 27% of homeless students of that 4,000 were identified pre-K through 12, identified special education. And I'll talk a little bit later about why I think that happens and why we need to pay attention to it. So we can go to the next slide. So you might have to hit it again because I think it comes the screen. I have a slide that kind of does that fade in. Let's see if it works. Oh, it didn't show up. That's strange. Yeah. Okay, so we'll just, if you hit on it again, Alina, is it coming up? It's like a blue, it should be like a blue, you're not seeing it. Okay. So I can talk from this because I do this all the time. So there's supposed to be blue boxes there, and I don't know why they're not showing up. I have it on my slide, so I can just quickly talk to you about it. So homeless children and youth face educational challenges. They lack basic needs such as food, clothing, school supplies, lack of medical services, the lack of continuity in education due to mobility. Also, trauma is caused by poverty, family instability, chaos. So all of that affects children. Children who are going through a homeless situation are really affected by these, and so is their education. So we can go to the next slide. Lena, the one that says homeless children and youth with disabilities face additional barriers. I'm reading off my slides because I can see the blue on my screen. So thinking of all the things that homeless children experience, typical homeless children experience, but then when you have children and youth with a disability, here we have an additional barriers. We have delay in services. We have children that might not be identified in needing special education services because they're very highly mobile, they're moving around a lot, or a process starts at a school and then it has to be stopped because the family moves schools or has to go to a shelter. So that difficulty with the diagnosis because the student is moving and they have other stressors in their life. So lack of service provision, lack of services due to changing schools. And also, sometimes in the Mckinney Vento world, it's hard to transfer records in a timely manner. So sometimes in Torrington even, we might have a student that is homeless, but we don't find out their special education till they start school with us. So we have tried to figure that out, and we've put something on our enrollment forms that ask that very question so we know. So I think that's it for the blue. So we can switch slides, and then if I can't read something else, I'll flip over to mine. Perfect. So these two laws are really tied together, and I do see that in my day-to-day work with these two laws because they're such that 27% of kids in that 4,000 in Connecticut are special education as well. And I know today I'm, tying these two together because this group is a group that, families come together to talk about special education and support each other around that issue. So these are two major educational laws that are both awesome laws, and they help with educational stability and support for student and families. So we're very grateful these two laws exist because if they didn't, we'd be really having to advocate for a lot more. We have these laws in place so we can always fall back to them. Are they perfect? No, we all know that, but they're here for us. So you can switch that slide. I won't read you the boring sections of the law, but so the Mckinney Vento Act was originally passed in 1987. And I always like to tell people a little fun fact about McKinney Vento. Senator McKinney was from Connecticut. He lived on the shoreline, Stuart McKinney, and he's passed away now, but he saw the need for this act. I think he lived in like Westbrook or one of those beautiful shore towns. And Senator Vento was from Arizona. So it's a homegrown law. So I just like to share that. And in 2015, it was updated, and some things were added, some things were taken out. Um, a big thing that was added was they finally added preschool. So if a public school has a preschool, a public school preschool, those children now are covered under that. And that's really important because often our entry point into special education is through public school preschool. So that's a very important feature. And it also helps raise the voices of little ones that may have gone unnoticed in a school system. And I think it also too, by 2015, we had a lot more schools running public preschool. So the need to really put that age ban in there was important. When the law was reauthorized in 2015, it also took out foster care youth. So youth that were under DCF guardianship or were waiting foster home, they no longer fall under Mckinney Vento. So some argue that that was a good thing because we had a lot of numbers of homeless kids if they were waiting foster homes, because we know that's a need in our state. We don't have in that nationwide, we don't have a lot of homes for students waiting for foster care, but they also had a place to be at night, and we'll talk a little bit more about the law and why that's important. And the main reason that this law exists is to ensure identification, enrollment, and success in school for children and youth experiencing homelessness. So this law, so all of us McKinney Vento liaisons have to make sure all schools know how to identify kids. We have to post posters up in the school and talk about the law, because it's not something people come into the main office and say, hey, I think I'm homeless, can you help me? It's something people hide. So we're really trying the schools to really educate people on the law. There's some excellent posters that the federal government, it's a federal law, the federal government develops and says is your family one of these families? Does your family meet this qualification? So it's very important to educate on this law because it's not something people come running to tell you. So you can change the slide. I tend to talk off the slides, so I don't know why why I use slides, but so homelessness and education. We talked a little bit about the barriers of being homeless, high mobility, trauma, fear, invisibility. People don't talk about it, enrollment requirements. A lot of parents are very nervous to say they're homeless because they don't want to leave their home school. They don't want to say, "Oh, I'm homeless, so now I got to move to, say my family I became homeless in Waterbury. Now I'm living on someone's couch in Danbury. Now I'm afraid I got to tell the school they're going to make me go to Danbury schools and I don't want to go there." And nothing against Danbury schools, they're great schools, but so sometimes just telling the parents, hey, wait, you're okay. If you tell us, we could help you because you're allowed to stay in your home school. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think, kids going through this, parents are very fearful to say, they're also fearful of, say, DCF or not caring for their child, but they're really doing the best they can do because kids that are going through this situation may have poor health, eating habits, poor sleep habits. We see a lot of kids in our area in the Northwest corner that couch surf or live with other families for 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there. And that all leads to possible not having your homework done because you left it somewhere else the night before. So a lot of declining in school enrollment, mental health challenges, lower rates of high school graduation in some cases. So we really try to educate teachers too. If you're seeing a student, if you're hearing they're getting on the bus at a different location every day, or we try to teach those red flags, or if they are forgetting their homework or they're coming in with a different bag every day, maybe there is something more to that. Maybe we need to look at that a little bit more. And that's when they call me in to often talk to parents about that. So you could change that slide. Yeah, thank you. So every school system in the nation must have a Mckinney Vento liaison. So any school that you are interfacing with your own children or your relatives, they have a person who is named the Mckinney Vento liaison. And another intersection with special education is often the school district designates somebody, and it's often someone that has another big job usually, and quite often it is the director of student services or the director of special education or the director of special services. So often that's what happens, and then this law kind of sits there, and if they have to use it they do, if they don't they don't. um, there are some districts in our state of Connecticut. I think New Haven is one. I'm using that as an example because they have a very active, very good Mckinney Vento liaison. Because they put the effort there. They fund that position. So Torrington works with me to be a person that isn't just given to it because it's something they have to do, like wear a hat and you're going to do this. They really put attention to it. So I focus more on it than the person that's named it because she's got a big job and she can't get to all the cases. So because we really do. We have to identify students, we have to provide professional development, we have to make referrals and help families find housing, health supports, mental health, substance abuse. I mean, homelessness comes with some baggage that often has to be supported by someone helping guiding them through. So it's, a lot of school districts just can't spend the time on it. It's not their fault. It's an unfunded mandate. We all know about those. It's one of those things the schools have to do, and it's doesn't come with any funding. But there are some cities and towns in Connecticut that have special funding. It's called the McKinney Vento subgrant that can put a little more attention to it. And the one I work in does have that. So we can switch that slide. So who is homeless? Children who lack a fixed, regular, adequate nighttime residence. That's right from the law. So that's any student or child or family sharing housing of others due to the loss of housing, economic hardship, or similar reasons. So if you have to share housing with somebody, again, we always look at the situation because in a community I work in, that's a strategy for some of our Latino families that they save up, they move here, and they do stay with auntie and grandma and uncle. And it's a heck of an idea because they have a built-in babysitter and they have someone cooking meals at night. It's a way to get on your own and a way to save money. So we don't code them homeless because they're sharing housing. So you have to look at it case by case. This is usually someone that's been evicted and all of a sudden they find themselves loss of housing and really have to double up because they would have no other where to go. And I usually do ask that question. If you couldn't stay on your friend's couch or stay in your friend's spare room, where would you go? And quite often the answer is I would be on the streets and those are believable answers. We do have families that's the case. Any family living in a motel, hotel, trailer park, or campground due to lack of alternative accommodations. So That's an automatic. When a school system sees an address, you know, the Red Roof Inn or whatever have you, that's an automatic. So sometimes families, in the winter time, we see this because our state of Connecticut, especially during weather like this, calls the cold weather protocol. So if they find any family, if a police officer finds any family on the streets, we hope that is not the case. There's some funding in each town for hoteling during this cold period of time we have. If you're in an emergency shelter or a transitional shelter, that's automatic Mckinney Vento. So that's all your domestic violence shelters. It's your, if you're in the Waterbury area, we have St. Vincent de Paul. We have those larger shelters up here in the Northwest corner. Some of our YMCA's offer shelter. So you probably are familiar if you have a shelter in your community. So any kid living there is Mckinney Vento. And then we have, if you're living in a car, parks, abandoned building, train stations, those are automatic Mckinney Vento. We don't have a lot of that in Connecticut, but we do. And since I started this Mckinney Vento, I've been in the field for many years, have done Mckinney Vento for about 12, 15, 12 years. I have seen an increase in families in cars at the start of the school year. At this point, they're not in cars because I'm doing everything I can to have them not be in cars. So 100%, no kid that I know of is in a car. But I have never seen that. But the last few years, it's becoming common. August, September months. Also, substandard housing, and again, there's a lot of rules on this, but mold. We have a family right now that had their water pump broke, and it just really caused a lot of damage. It wasn't fixable. The landlord would not help. So the family, there was mold, a lot of health concerns with that. So that they are Mckinney Vento at this point because they had to go elsewhere. So you can change that slide, Lena. Thank you. So all those things qualify families, but we take a look at it case by case. Now, unaccompanied youth, we also categorize unaccompanied youth. This is a child who meets all those things we talked about in that slide before, but they are not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. And these are the students that, if they have special education, that we look for a surrogate for them at the state level, and we have someone serve as their surrogate advocate for them with special education. So they, and the law too, sadly, does not define the word child. So it can be any youth or child at any age. So obviously, this one comes with some scrutiny in terms of needing to make a DCF referral. Obviously, if the child is under 18, that becomes a little challenging. They're not eligible for a lot of services. They're not eligible for housing assistance or anything like that. They can't call 211 on their own to access shelter. That's our state's homeless response system. People call 211 and they access shelter. It's option 3, actually, 211 option 3, and it's the housing navigators that they'll talk with. So if you're under 18, you're not allowed to make that call on your own. So we don't have a lot of kids that fall under 18 in this category, but I have about 5 right now that are 18 and over in high school that fall in this category, and they struggle. And if you do throw special education in there, they definitely need an advocate, and they do struggle because they're now trying to make ends meet on their own. They're trying to navigate school, finish school, so it can get a little hard, challenging. So we can switch that slide. So, when we look at nationwide data, most kids fall within that category of staying with others, that big purple pie slice there. So, that's where a lot of families fall. The tricky part with that is that it's harder to classify them because we're probably missing a bunch of families. I mean, probably on this call, you all could think of someone that now you're thinking, oh, I wonder if little Johnny was homeless when I met him, or that school child, because it's becoming very difficult to live in Connecticut and afford rents and afford your housing. So a lot of people do use that as a strategy. So luckily, we're not a this is nationwide data, but this mirrors Connecticut. We're not a Our state of Connecticut's not a state where we see a lot of unsheltered students, but I'll tell you, I go to a national conference every year, and Connecticut has one table, but California, Florida, states where it's warmer, they do see more families living in tents and outside. So it's nationwide, it's a bigger concern. But in Connecticut, we tend to be more in that doubled up category. So we can switch that slide. You're all going to get the slides to look at it more in depth. So the connection to so this is my special blue thing that's not coming up. So let me let me flip down. I'm sorry. I must have did something special and I don't even know what I did. Okay. So connection to special education. So nationally, 1.1 million students were identified as homeless. Remember, Connecticut in that year was 4,000. So 20% of those children, 221,000, were children with disabilities. So compared to 15% of the overall student population. So proportionally, there's more students with disabilities that fall into that homeless category. And infant and toddlers, and I'm kind of biased because I definitely I'm in the field of early childhood, but infant and toddlers are for sure um, definitely there's more developmental delays with infant and toddlers who are homeless. So because of that, I have a State Department of Ed grant, but in my grant, I have a person that if we find out in a shelter that there's a first or second grader, that's great, a high schooler, but we have on our enrollment form, do you have a younger children at home? And often they'll say, matter of fact, we have an infant or we have a 2-year-old. So we go out and we do the Sparkler app or Ages and Stages. We will go out and screen, so we make sure they're following milestones. If they're not, we make a referral with the family to birth to 3. So we kind of look at that because we know the data tells us if families are going through a homeless situation, if they're living in a shelter, possible developmental delays aren't being picked up. And one reason too is because when you're in a shelter situation, families are kind of parenting under a microscope. You're not letting your kids, you know, experience toys the way that we would let them experience toys on your living room floor. You're not letting your high schooler, talk loud to a friend, that kids can't be kids all the time. So sometimes we're masking, their developmental qualities and we're missing things. So we make sure we actually go out to the shelters to make sure we're seeing kids in their environment. So you can switch that slide. Okay. So, we're not the only ones paying attention this call, paying attention to how the two laws connect. There was some new guidance in 2024, and I did skim it. And it was in response to when the federal government did some audits on the IDEA. They did see that states were having a little trouble meshing the two laws because Mckinney Vento doesn't really care about your nexus or doesn't care about where what school you're attached to. It's really in the best interest of the child. So a family that is going through a homeless situation could end up being in another town and decide to register in that town. And that is the Mckinney Vento law. And no one owns that child. That family is able to make that decision for themselves to what's in the best interest. And a clear case of that is if you're in families that are coming home to us homeless from a domestic violence situation, they might not want to go back to their home and go to that same school, even if special education was a great thing for them there. They have to go to a new school. So sometimes the schools get a little like, oh no, here comes that special education family. I'm gonna have to spend some big bucks on them. I'm afraid, you know, and I think, and McKinney Vento too. McKinney Vento, you have to provide transportation. So I think sometimes schools are so nervous about their budgets that they they put that radar up first without thinking about what the best interest of the child is. And sometimes the best interest is to keep the child in the school where they became homeless because they have awesome IEPs in place. The student is very familiar with their program. So sometimes there's some behind the scene things that I have to kind of work at, and we have to do better at it because we have to look at the child first and figure that out. So you can go ahead and switch that slide. Then I promise I'll stop talking and you can ask questions. So this is my funny blue thing again. I'm just going to look here. So connection to special education. So states receiving IDEA funds. See, I'm not good at this law. You guys could do a presentation for me on this. They must ensure Mckinney Vento requirements are met for all children with disabilities experiencing homelessness. So Mckinney Vento, if a child is under the IDA law, they have to follow Mckinney Vento just like they'd follow it for any other student. So any student homeless under Mckinney Vento is homeless under IDEA. Child find efforts must ensure children with disabilities who are homeless are identified, located, and evaluated. If I find a soon to be 3-year-old in our local shelter, the school system, I can't say, oops, just they're not in our school yet. They're in our shelter in our community. So that student could go to that school for services if they're picked up as a 3-year-old. So, and again, we talked about the unaccompanied youth. It requires that surrogate parent for any student who's an unaccompanied youth. So you can switch that slide. And here's the transportation part. Transportation is also a critical component of the Special Education Act. So again, the two have to work together, students who are homeless are eligible to receive transportation to the school of origin. So if I become homeless in Waterbury and I need to go live in New Haven because that's where my aunt said I can sleep on her couch, then I can get transportation back from New Haven to Waterbury every day. I should be able to go to my home school, Waterbury, where all my services are in place. Um, we we can, as a McKinney Vento liaison, look at that to also see if it's in the best interest of the child. So what I mean by that, I've had some students that were young, kindergartners, and going from Torrington, which people think is the end of the earth here, northwest corner of Connecticut, to say Danbury. That's a long ride for a kindergarten student. So sometimes we have to work with the family on that. And the school system has the right to say that, to say, maybe it's not in your best interest to stay in Danbury schools. Maybe you should, live in Torrington or vice versa, where you became homeless because it's a long bus ride for a little child. If it's a high school senior, they can handle it. So we do look at that issue. Children with special needs are also afforded transportation in certain situations. And again, that right remains even with homeless situation. So if it's best for the family to stay an hour away and they want to remain in their school, we have to make that happen. And any student that is experiencing homelessness is eligible to attend any of the regular activities that their peers would attend. So extracurricular activities. A lot of schools have late buses. That late bus has to be available for students. Again, age requirements sometimes are part of that, but everything, if you're a homeless student, you really have the rights of what your peers have, including your special education peers. And sometimes I feel like schools do say the two laws kind of maybe supersede each other, but they should be working in tandem with each other. So we can switch that slide. And students that are homeless have the right to enroll immediately in school. And that means that if they don't have their immunization record or their information from their IEP, come on in, we will work to get it. So it's getting the student in school first, and then the paperwork follows. And that's a huge thing, because schools are very strict with that, but the law clearly says that we'll work with you on the other stuff, but let's get you in the school seat. So that's something that is a little bit concerning to like school nurses or the office staff, because they're like, wait a minute, every other kid has to, show me their proof of whatever. If they're coming from a shelter, we know they're homeless for sure. We can take them in immediately. And so what we did in Torrington is, so we didn't take a student in immediately and set them up for failure. We have a little we have a checklist, a Mckinney Vento checklist, and it will actually, we say, does your child have an IEP in the district that they are coming from? Just so we know, we'll have you come today, but we're going to really work hard to find that IEP so we can help you in school and help you. You're already going through enough. Let's get you in the seat and get you the supports that you need or that you had. So we have added that on our enrollment form. So that's kind of like the point of tonight, looking at the two laws and what we could do better as a state, as a community. And every community is different, but Torrington, we have done a few things to really help expedite the process if kids are special needs, and Mckinney Vento. So you can switch that slide. And, the law is just to remove barriers. So we always have to look at policies. And this actually, preparing for this workshop really had me thinking that I do want to look at some more policies around special education, because even as seasoned I am with the law, when a student is special ed and we have a student right now that's outplaced, and things get mucky with the two laws. So, but they really shouldn't, because they're two of the same type of missions is to make sure there's access to education. So I am going to do a little looking at that. But really, Mckinney Vento is there to really remove all barriers for enrollment. So we can switch that slide. And school stability, that's a major piece. Keep the student in the school of origin, as we've talked about, for the duration of homelessness or to the end of the academic year. So if a family becomes homeless in, say, January, and they find housing in April, that's wonderful. We keep them coded as Mckinney Vento the whole school year, because we know that, families have to get back on their feet. They're in a precarious situation. And then the new school year, we say, oh, great, you found housing. You're going to enroll now. You're going to stay right here because that's where you found housing, or you're going to enroll in your new school. So you can't use the law when you're housed in another town or whatever. So some families find housing in another town. And in June, I let them know that we're so happy you found permanent housing. Now that you did, you'll have to enroll in the new town. And this is where sometimes students say, or families, oh, but my child's programming is all set up in Torrington. That's where we've always gone. We've always been. And we became homeless. We had to move to Winstead, which is the neighboring town. And now we have to uproot all that and leave our special education program in Torrington because we found housing in Winstead. And the answer is yes. So once families do find residency and it's fixed, regular, adequate nighttime residence, and that they meet that part of the law, then they do have to enroll in the new school. So it does get a little dicey, but it is part of the law. Once they do have housing, they have the whole school year. Once they're coded, even if they find housing a week later after they're coded, they have the whole school year. But the new school year, if they're housed, they need to register where they're housed. So, you know, families definitely often want to stay in the school of origin where they become homeless. So there is transportation implications for that. But we do work with students on that. So we can